My name is Damilola Oshe. I usually like to say that Scrum and Agile isn't just what I do as work, is who I am, is what I love, is at my core. Why do I say that? I hate bureaucracy, unnecessary bureaucracy. I just want to get on with things and, let's just move on and focus on the results and achieve what we have set out to achieve. Scrum shares that sentiment or those beliefs. And so that's why, for me, Scrum is something I relate with very much, is what I love, is who I am. I mean, Agile is who I am and all of that. Just as an aside, I don't know how many people saw the game yesterday between Barcelona and Bayern. I was just thinking about it this morning, that so for those who didn't see it, Barcelona lost scandalously, 8 goals to 2. Barcelona is supposed to be one of the strongest teams in the world, and then they got beaten so much. And I was thinking about it this morning, like, how could they have lost so much? And some parts of the games, came back to my mind. And one of the conclusions I could draw is they lost because they were not agile enough. If you look at the stats from after the game, the Bayern Munich players ran more, covered more kilometers than the Barcelona players. And for the most part of the game, sorry for those who do not love football, I'm just trying to drive at something. For those who saw the game, for most part of the game, the Barcelona players kept using the ball in their own half. Why? Because that was the only way they knew how to play. They only know how to pass the ball out from the back. They don't know how to launch the ball high up the field. And they kept losing possession. But now, I said they were not agile enough, because Agile teaches us to inspect what we are doing and adapt to the reality of what we know as we come to find, when we deep dive into the Scrum. Scrum teaches us to inspect whatever we are doing and adapt. Agile teaches us not to be rigid. Check what you are doing. If it's not working, make the necessary changes. Barcelona players yesterday did not make the necessary changes. And the same applies to a lot of our organizations out there. We keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. But that is so anti-agile and anti-Scrum. So today, and for the rest of the days we have together to deep dive into Scrum, we are going to be learning a lot. And I can't wait to drive these conversations. Let's talk about organizational models. Like I said, we are trying to move from what we know to the unknown. So, pick something to text. Right. So, every organization is set up with singular objective of, making profits. Basically, they are in business to make profit. Whatever organization, even these days, the non-for-profit organizations are now making profit. So essentially, businesses are set up to make profits, but unfortunately, they either make profits or make losses, based on conditions that are in play. To drive profit or profitability, organizations usually come up with strategies. In fact, before that, they come up with what you call vision statements, mission statements. And, those mission statements and vision statements can be further broken down into strategies. Strategies are essentially what we want to do, or how we hope to achieve our mission and our vision. I'm sure we are all familiar with organization's vision and mission statements. Now, this strategy can now be further broken down into, okay, yes, we have this strategy. We want to take over these markets. We want to take over that industry. We want to expand. We want to get this percentage of the market share in this business. Essentially, how do we do that? How do we achieve that? We now start to break our strategy into actionable items. By actionable items, we start thinking of, okay, we need to set up, some projects, for instance, to achieve some of the objectives that we have set out for ourselves through the strategy. Now, we start having project teams, like, this team will deal with this component of our targets. This project team will deal with another side of it and all of that. Now, a combination of similar projects similar projects forms what we call a program. So, for instance, if as an organization our objective is to be the best company that builds mobile apps within the banking industry, or let's say we are a company that builds mobile apps, for instance, and all we have ever done is to build mobile apps within the banking industry. But part of our strategy is to expand to other financial institutions, to expand to health and fitness, to expand building our mobile services, mobile apps in all kinds of industry. One of our projects, or some of our projects, would be to improve what we do, what we deliver for in the banking industry or in the financial industry. So we have a lot of projects within that space. Now, all of this, the summation of all of the projects we are doing within the banking industry will be called a program. So it might be like a whole program for improving our offerings within the mobile financial space in the banking mobile financial space. Yes, we can have another set of projects that we are running to gain entry or market share in the health and fitness space. So the collection of all of those projects, those similar projects, make up our program. Now, a combination of all programs and projects within an organization makes up the portfolio of the organization. So think of the portfolio as a very big box that contains different compartments of programs and projects. Think of the portfolio manager now, the guy that is almost at the very top, that is like the sponsor of every program and project that the organization is running. So now the team that runs manages this portfolio, programs and projects, they are on the temporary side of things in the organization. By temporary, we mean these guys don't keep doing the same thing all year round. Once one project finishes, they move to another project, right? Now, within that same organization, there are other departments like the marketing department, finance department, the IT department, the HR department, the logistics department, and any other department you can think about. These guys are on the operational side of things. The marketing guys, we market what the project guys have produced. The finance guys, we support what the project guys are doing by providing finance. The IT department will support the applications, customer service, customer support, and all of that. The outcomes of the projects that are developed by these guys on the temporary side. The HR department, we all know what they do, logistics department, and all of that. Now, all of these things that these guys do can either translate into profit or loss, based on the outcome of projects or programs. And then it can either make customer angry, customer happy, or customer nonchalant. Those are the outcomes. So what the message here is that within the organization, whether you are running on the temporary side, on the project side, or on the operational side, everybody is contributing one way or the other towards profit or loss for the organization. And basically, this is what the organizational structure looks like today. And why are we learning this? We are learning it to understand that, okay, as people trying to understand Scrum, we basically fall on the operational, on the project side of things, on the temporary side of things. Now, projects can be very complex and can be very easy, very simple. So we need to understand the project complexity framework. Essentially, so there are four basic level of complexities. The first one is here, the obvious, right? Yeah, we need to implement a project, and we know what we are trying, we know where we are going, and we know what we need to do to get to where we are going. So we can easily establish, when we can easily establish a relationship between a cause and the effect that we want to achieve, then we say that, okay, this is an obvious, this is supposed to be obvious, not obvious, sorry about that. This is an obvious solution. I'm trying to think of an example now. Okay, let's say we want to migrate a database from one version to another version within the same, using the same tool or the same solution. We know what to do, not too much is changing. So we just need to, upgrade. We know that when we do this, we are going to get this. So it's a bit straightforward. And how do you approach that kind of thing? Okay, we sense it, like, okay, we can think through it, and then we try to categorize our actions, and then we respond. We do what we have to do to get to the destination we are going. That is one level. The obvious, level of complexity is not so obvious. In fact, in some organizations, some very agile organizations, this type of categories of projects have been moved to operations. Let me give you an example. Some of the financial service providers today have APIs, they have kits that people can integrate to, say for payment solution, for instance. They've made it so easy, they just provide those kits, make it available to the public. If you want to integrate to our solution, just take these kits, do a few things, and then bam, you are on our solution. You are using our payment gateway already, something like that. So for a lot of very agile organizations, they've moved some of these obvious things into, operations, into, quick automations. We are not going to need to call a project meeting to do a simple integration to a payment gateway, for instance. So that's one level of complexity. That's the easiest level. Let's talk about the complicated. In the complicated type of project, the relationship between cause and effect requires analysis or some other form of investigation or the application of expert knowledge. You cannot just say, yes, we know what to do, or we know what to do to get to where we are going. It's not as straightforward. 1 + 1 is not always going to be equal to 2 in this kind of project. It's complicated. You need expert knowledge. You need to sit down and analyze things. You need a subject matter expert to come into the room to say, okay, these are the other factors that you need to consider. A lot of analysis needs to happen. So what typically happens here is, yes, we can sense where we are going. We have a sense of direction, but we need to do some analysis before we start taking action. That's what we see in this complicated level, or complicated level. So this is like a level 2. Now, let's come to this one, level 3, complex. And this is where, okay, let me explain first. The relationship between cause and effect can only be perceived in hindsight, right? You cannot, no matter the level of analysis you do, you cannot legislate for what can come up in the middle of this project. And this is our reality today as, developers or as people delivering solutions to clients. The environment today is so fluid, is so, what's the word now? Nothing is fixed, kind of. Imagine a product you are trying to build for COVID-19, for instance. At the start of COVID-19, you had some ideas. Oh, we need to build a solution that can help people navigate this whole process. But what you find at the start of COVID-19 is that even you or the customer that requires the solution does not have enough knowledge about COVID-19. But in any case, we need to start building something. So it's complex because the relationship between cause and effect can only be perceived in insight. It is as we do that we know, and then we adapt ourselves. So the projects that fall in this kind of category are complex projects. So what we typically do is we probe, we ask questions, and how do we probe? Sometimes we start doing something, we try this one, and then we see, we try what we call an MVP, for instance. We throw something out there, allow people use it, get feedback, from the kind of feedback they provide. We start trying to make sense of it, and then we respond to that feedback to provide something better. So that is where Agile plays a very key role, managing complex deliveries, managing complex solutions. So it is called an emergent practice because you don't have a full view of where you are going. It's going to keep emerging as you go, and you are going to need to keep adapting to it as you learn more. We are going to go into all of that. So it's important to understand this very well with respect to what we are trying to do. Inspection and adaptation, probing, sensing, and responding. Now, the last category under project complexity is novel practice. The relationship between cause and effect is at the systemic level. You just need to try things fair. You don't even know. You can't predict anything. You need to, if for instance you want to build a imagine our world and some years back when America wanted to launch their first space rocket or something, send them out to the moon. Imagine how chaotic that process would have been. They've never done it before. Nobody has done this kind of thing before. We've read books, yes. We have theoretical knowledge, yes. But it's not enough until we try this thing, until we do something can even go wrong. So in this kind of project, it's a lot more. It's gone beyond complex. It can be chaotic. We don't know a lot of things. We need to ensure that every X will be equal to Y when we launch. So basically the relationship between cause and effect is at system level. And what you typically do in this kind of project is, you want to act, sense, and then be ready to respond as quickly as possible. But before you even act, you want to be sure that a lot of things are in place. Everything that can go wrong, you are doing everything you can to prevent them from going wrong. So those are the project complexity. Everything I've said so far is not going to come out in your PSM1 exam. It's not part of the Scrum framework. It's just part of fundamentals that you need to know. So this is a more pictorial view of the 4 project complexity levels that we try to explain. Simple, complicated, complex, chaotic. Right. Now, so to deliver projects, there are 2 broad approaches or 2 broad methodologies for project delivery. We have the waterfall or the traditional methodology, and then we have the agile or the iterative methodology. Now, the waterfall methodology is older, is been here for a longer time, and it has some kind of limitation. So it typically looks like a waterfall, like the Niagara waterfall, like the Jesha waterfall, or what kind of waterfall. So it typically starts from top and flows down. That's why it has that name, waterfall, or a traditional approach. Let's talk about the traditional approach to project delivery before we come to our agile. Again, what I'm saying here is not going to be part of your exam, but it's good for you to know it, to be able to practice very well what Scrum teaches. So basically, the waterfall methodology teaches us to, when we want to do a project, we must first gather all the requirements, document everything you know before you start. Don't write any single line of code, or don't design anything until the customer has told you everything they want to achieve. That is unrealistic, because what you're essentially asking for is that the customer becomes a robot. He knows everything. He cannot change his mind. He cannot see something better and ask for it somewhere down the line. And everything he has told us has to be exactly what we will do. Otherwise, if he wants to change his mind, we will always come back to this requirement stage again and stop everything we are doing, come back to gather the requirements and analyze everything again before we continue work. So essentially, the waterfall methodology wants you to do things, understand everything and document all the requirements before you design it. It is after you have completed all the design. So imagine that you are building a website or a web page, a website of 500 pages. We must know everything that will go into the 500 pages before we even design one page. That's what the waterfall methodology is saying. So it is after we have documented everything that will go into the 500 pages, we can start designing page 1. It is when we have completed design of page 500, we can now start writing the codes that will bring code page 1 to life. And it is after we have written all the codes from page 1 to page 500, we can start testing from page 1 of the website. Now, it is after we have tested everything before we are able to deploy anything to the customer. Now, what typically happens here is, you in the middle of the game, in a very fluid environment, in a very change-driven environment where your customers or your competitors are going to the market as quickly as they can with their product, you'll be wasting time, you'll be losing time gathering requirements for 500 pages when your customer has already, when your competitor or your competition has already launched something and is already taking the market share. Now, what also happens is, so what we are talking about now is essentially the limitations of the waterfall methodology. What also happens is that your customer does not get to see anything, or your client does not get to see anything until after you have deployed, right? So you are not able, so if the customer, if something is wrong with what you are doing, or with the way you have interpreted the requirements, your customer is not able to know until you have finished the entire thing. So the guy just comes and says, oh, page 12 is wrong. And maybe in the development process, page 12 feeds into 300 other pages in the design. It means that you need to change 301 pages of work, make modifications to 301 pages of work to change, to address the complaints of your customer after maybe 6 months of work. So the waterfall approach was so limited that it was not open to change. It was rigid. Change was expensive, and you didn't have the ability to fail quickly and fail fast. By fail quickly, we mean, let's say we're showing our customer after every 10 pages we design and say, come and see what we have done so far. What is the feedback that you have for us? We would have tracked, or tracked the changes the customer wanted on page 12 early enough, and then we would have been able to modify and adapt our work to reflect what the customer wanted. So the waterfall methodology had that kind of limitation. It was slow. It was, in fact, a lot of projects failed using the waterfall methodology in comparison with the Agile methodology. See the statistics that came out that an organization did. The organization is called, okay, this one was done by, it was displayed in a report called the Chaos Manifesto in 2012. So they tried to analyze the challenges, the challenges of the waterfall methodology, the projects that used waterfall methodology. What they found was that only 14% of such projects are actually successful. 57% of such projects, the number of projects that they looked at between 2002 and 2010, those projects that used the waterfall methodology, 57% of those projects were challenged. I'll give you a typical example. The Olympics, 2016 Rio Olympics, the project was managed using a waterfall approach, and that they almost cancelled the Olympics was almost moved away from Brazil at some point. A year to the Olympics, so one of the main stadiums was not ready. In fact, it caved. Some part of the stadium caved in and gave way. You know, an example of how it can break. And what typically happened is the government just felt, okay, we have handed over the project to a project management company, let them run things. They were not wrong, let them do their thing. They were not inspecting, they were not checking anything. They just wanted them to use their thing. But you realize that like 57%, according to this data that was gathered in 2012, 57% of projects that are using the waterfall methodology are challenged in one way or the other. What typically happens again is that you now start extending timelines, extending delivery dates because of challenges that were not legislated for. And we also find out about 29% of such projects fail at the end of the day. So this was not sustainable. People needed a different way of doing things, especially within the IT field. So it was clear that we could not continue to use what was not working. So what happened? I mean, it was about Einstein that said insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So clearly we needed a different approach to project delivery. And that led us to what we call the Agile methodology. Now, what exactly is Agile methodology? I said earlier that Agile is like a buzzword that everybody just throws around and tries to use. We are agile. In fact, from the organization put it in their profile, we are an agile organization and all of that. What does agile really mean? Is a methodology, first of all, of delivering projects. But beyond the methodology, in a very simplistic way, agility refers to your ability to, how do I describe it? We can describe it as your fitness level, right? Let's describe it as your fitness level, your ability to go quickly and go again quickly, go quickly, go again, go, like a cheetah. Look at a cheetah. Compare a cheetah with a which other animal now? I don't want to compare with a very slow animal, but another animal that can run. But we know the cheetah is so fast, so agile. Okay, maybe the lion is also a bit fast. Maybe the leopard is also a bit fast. Maybe the rabbit is also a bit fast. But at the end of the day, you know that the cheetah is more agile than them, not only because it is faster than them, but because it can go quickly and go again and go again, time and time again. So it's a lot fitter than the rest of those animals. So agility just simply speaks to, our ability to go and go again, go quickly. Now, agile itself is a mindset. It is based on certain principles and certain, values. I'm going to talk about the values on this slide. So first of all, you need to understand that Agile is a mindset that values individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Agile places more value on individuals and interactions over processes and tools. See, the Agile mindset, the Agile organization, the Agile person is the one that understands the power of collaboration. Put people in a room or remotely or wherever, let them interact and do their job, not insisting on some processes and tools that get in the way of doing the job. Now, Agile does not say don't use processes or don't use tools. We are only saying that don't allow the processes that you have put in place in your organization or wherever to stand in the way of interactions, because at the end of the day, the people involved in the project are still the ones that will do the job. They are still the ones that will come up with the solutions, as you will find when we go deeply into Scrum. They are still the ones that will come up with the answers, to the questions. So we place more value on individuals and interactions over processes and tools. We place more value on working software over comprehensive documentation. See, the waterfall model will say, go and document all the requirements for the 500 pages in a way that is very, very clear from beginning to the end before we write one line of code. Agile will say to you, what do I know now based on my initial interaction with the customer? Okay, the customer wants 500 pages. Okay, the customer has this kind of color theme in mind. Okay, the customer has this kind of vision for his product. Can I quickly come up with a 10-page software based on the information I know and show it to the customer to say, does this align with your thoughts? Or at least can we sit down to refine your thoughts based on what we have done so far? Working software. In fact, one of the principles of Agile says that a working software is the primary measure of progress. I'm not going to talk about the principles of Agile in this class, but I'm giving you that assignment. Go and Google it. There are 12 principles. Read around them. One of the principles says that a working software is a primary measure of progress. So you can do all the activities, you can do all the project meetings, you can do all the documentations, you can do all the project reporting. If you're not producing an outcome that the customer wants to see, then you're not Agile. Not in name, not at heart. So working software over comprehensive documentation. Again, Agile does not say don't document, but Agile says that don't wait until you have documented everything before you start working. Start doing something. Start from where you know, start from where you are. Agile is a mindset that values customer collaboration over contract negotiation. This is a tricky one. I've got people asking me questions around, oh, are you saying we should not sign contract and all of that? No. What we are saying here is, first of all, see your customer as a partner. See your client as a partner. Because at the end of the day, we are in business because we have customers, because we have clients. So see your customer as a partner in progress that you want to help deliver a solution for. Otherwise, you will get stuck in the contract negotiation. Oh no, this one is not dotted. Oh no, this one is not clear. Don't let's get stuck in contracts that tie our hands from delivering, or that slow us down from delivering. That's what the Agile mindset is saying. You see, we can have differences in contract negotiations and say, oh, maybe this one does not work well for us and all of that. Agile contract, for instance, is a whole topic on its own if you want to learn about Agile contract. But what we are saying is, when you are interacting with your customer, when your customer brings a kind of change in the middle of the game because it's going to give them an edge in the market, you are not going to say, no, that's not part of the contract that was signed. We are not delivering that for you. That is not the Agile mindset. The Agile mindset will first of all listen to the customer, understand that, okay, if we deliver this extra that the customer is asking for, it's going to cost us. Yes, but at least let's hear the customer out first. Let's see if we can find alternatives to reduce the cost. If we cannot find alternatives, at least we have heard the customer. We understand what the customer is asking for. We are willing to try what the customer is asking us to try, and then we can now have a conversation about what the cost of trying that is going to be. Agile is saying, don't shut out any ideas, don't shut out any opinion of customer because, oh, the contract we signed is rigid, we have dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. You cannot add any other thing, or you cannot add any other request. That is not the Agile mindset. The Agile mindset is a mindset that values responding to change over following a plan. In fact, one of the 12 principles of Agile talks about being open to change and welcoming change, even late in development. Late in development can be as late as we are going to deploy something tomorrow. We have built this application, we have tested it with the customer, we have demonstrated it to the customer is happy, and then the customer goes to show his own guy in his organization, or the customer gets some kind of feedback from their own customer and they realize that we need to change something, the agile mindset will not say, no way, we are not changing it. We are receptive to change. We are receptive to growth because, I mean, when we change for the better, we actually grow. So the agile mindset is responsive to change, is welcoming of change. We don't stick to a plan. In fact, we are not saying don't make a plan. No, agile is not chaotic. Make a plan, but we understand that our plan is just a guide. It can be, our plan should be flexible. That is what the agile mindset is. We are not stuck to, okay, this is the way we say we want to deliver the application, even though the facts have changed, even though the reality or the expectations have changed. We are not going to change because we made a plan. That is very, that is not agile at all. That is not the agile mindset. So these are the things that agile values in delivery. Let's quickly do okay, let's look at this. So essentially, we have an understanding of agile is just a methodology, an iterative methodology of it means that we deliver things in bits, we break them down into small components. We don't want to run like the waterfall and go all the way, making mistakes and being happy that we are delivering. No, agile says break them into components. So agile is also like we said, is a methodology, but within that agile methodology, there are several frameworks. And one of those frameworks is Scrum, the Scrum framework that we are going to be learning today. But there's also the Kanban framework. Kanban framework is like a flow process. The catch for Kanban is stop starting, start finishing. So it says Kanban typically teaches you to keep the flow of task going. Stop taking on so many things at the same time. Stop keeping so many things in your to-do list or in your doing list. Don't put so much in view at a particular time. Just focus on one thing at a time if possible. So it says stop starting so many things. Start finishing the things that you have started. So that's the catch for Kanban. Stop starting, start finishing. Lean is also another framework within the agile methodology. It says essentially don't carry so much unnecessary things, unnecessary load. And that's also one of the principles of agile. All right, is that principle? I think that's the last principle. It says simplicity is an art. The act is the act of maximizing work not done. Is simplicities. There are some things that we try to deliver on the project that are not really important to the customer now. Why are we focused on it? Focus on the essentials first. If we have extra time, we can build the aesthetics around this. If you see the way the Germans build their system, it might not be a beautiful website, it might not be a beautiful app, but you know what? It will be strong, it will be sturdy, it will be efficient the way it's supposed to be. So lean is essentially cutting out waste. That's the catch for lean. Cutting out waste. Anything that will make us encourage waste, we kick against it. That is what lean essentially talks about. Extreme programming is another framework. I'll let you read about that. Now, these are all of these I've listed are lighter agile approaches. They are typically focused on the development bit of the work. Now we also have DSDM and SAFe. SAFe is Scaled Agile Framework, right? SAFe and then DSDM. These are more extensive agile approaches. They include Scaled Agile and they are typically project focused. Now, and this can even be used to drive this SAFe, for instance, can even be used to drive organizational transformation, right? How do we change the way we do things in our organization? The learnings from SAFe can be applied to drive organizational transformation. So this is like a bigger agile. This is where you'll find something like a Scrum of Scrum, right? Scrum that swallows other Scrum. Something it sits somewhere inside here. So I'll let you read around some of these things just for knowledge sake. Again, nobody's going to ask you all of this in the PSM exam. Yeah. So that's essentially the introduction to the agile world. just like in football, where you restart the game by, you know, stopping the ball from moving and maybe through taking a free kick or some kind of kick. In rugby, games are restarted by what we call scrum. So this gathering, I'm sure we must have seen something like this before in a scrum game, where everybody gathers around the ball and then the game restarts. So this is called scrum in rugby, and the scrum framework itself is modeled around that concept of restarting iteratively. Remember that Agile speaks to iterative nature of doing things. Agile speaks to the fact that you plan, you do, you check, you act, and you check, and you do that in iteration. So you break a very big project, for instance, into small chunks, and then within each of those small chunks, you do your requirement gathering, you do your design, you do your analysis, you do your development, you do your testing, maybe for 10 pages out of 500 pages, and then you do your deployment, you show it to the client, you get feedback, and then you restart again. So you understand Scrum the concept of Scrum coming from rugby, restarting. Okay, all right. So we are going into the Scrum concept itself now. What do we know about Scrum? So first of all, what we know is that Scrum is a framework, is one of the Agile frameworks, many Agile frameworks. And basically, Scrum consists of what you call the Scrum rules, the Scrum events, the Scrum artifacts, and then there are some rules that bind all of these things together. Then we know that Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland developed Scrum. Remember that certificate I showed you earlier? It was signed, the PSM1 and 2 certificate was signed by this guy, Ken Schwaber, right? The Scrum guide is written and provided by them, and together they stand behind the Scrum guide. What does Scrum say? What is the definition of Scrum? It says it is a, so let me say this before I continue. This Scrum guide is a 19-page document, and it is from this 19-page document that every question in your PSM1 exam will be extracted from. When I say every question, there are 80 questions that you need to answer in 60 minutes, I think. Yeah. And you need to get a pass mark of 85%. So this Scrum guide is something that we need to pay a lot of attention to as we go. I'm not just going to be reading it out to you. You can do that yourself. I'm going to be reading and explaining some important concepts that you need to hold on to, explaining some words, you know, that we need to break down clearly for us to be able to pass the exam. So Scrum, let's look at the definition. It says it's a framework within which people can address complex adaptive problems while productively and creatively delivering products of the highest possible value. The first word that jumps out at you there is framework, right? Framework is different from a methodology. The methodology tells you, go step by step, do it this way. When you do, after you do this next. After you do this next. Like, this is the method that we're going to take to achieve our results. The framework is different. The framework doesn't tell you how to do what you need to do. It only tells you what you need to do. Now, you can figure out how best to do what you need to do. That's the difference. So the way I like to explain a framework, look at a house, for instance, the door to a room in the house. When the house is being constructed, we create a frame for the door, right? Where we are going to hang the door eventually. All we know when we create that frame is the dimension. Okay, it's going to be so this height and this width. Now, a framework doesn't insist. It doesn't say you must put a wooden door, or no, I can only take a glass door, or I can only take certain type of door. No, the framework is there for you to plug in the door type that you feel will work. But the framework tells you, all the framework tells you is there needs to be a door in this place if you want to secure this room or this apartment. So think of a framework that way. It doesn't tell you how, it tells you what. So Scrum is that framework within which people, so that also says to us that there are people within Scrum that operate the Scrum within this, what we call the Scrum team. And then it says people can address complex adaptive problems. You remember when we were talking about the project complexities, different project complexities, we talked about the simple, talked about the, the complicated, and we talked about the complex. Now, complex adaptive problems, what does that mean? It means that, okay, we want to solve a problem that we don't have all the answers to, that actually we expect to learn more as we go. And like I tried to point out earlier, almost all the products or the projects we need to build today are found within this complex adaptive space. Why? Because people's desires and requests, or customers' demands, have become so fluid, have become so, not constant. They keep changing from time to time. And that is a lot driven by the market dynamics. Today, we are building a solution for something. Tomorrow, we realize that the customer wants a little bit more, or the customer wants a bit less of what we have been doing. So the truth is that as we go on building our products, things are going to change and we are going to need to adapt. So that's what we mean by adaptive problems. So if you understand that what I'm doing is subject to change, is not as straightforward like a simple or the simple. We talk about the simple and the complicated, right? It's not as simple as the simple one where I know that if I do X, X will always be equal to Y. Or it's not as, like the complicated one, if I analyze X well enough and analyze every other extraneous factor well enough, I'm sure of what my Y is going to become. If you're not running those kind of projects, then you know that you are running a project where change is constant, and you need to be able to manage that kind of change. You need to be able to adapt to those change to ensure that you deliver to your customer. So Scrum is that framework within which people can address complex adaptive problems while productively and creatively delivering products of the highest possible value. One other word that jumps at us there is value. Now, another very important word. Value in this case is as described or as expected by the customer or by the end user or by the client. If you are going to be able to deliver the highest possible value, it means that we are going to be flexible enough, adaptive enough to be able to collaborate with our customers in such a way that whatever we are giving to them will represent value. Value can be value now, immediate. It can be value in the future, somewhere down the line. Value can, what is valuable now might not be valuable tomorrow. That's the reality about the products and the projects that we deliver today. And that is why the Scrum framework is so powerful. It's so important to help us manage, value delivery within an adaptive space. So we said that Scrum is lightweight. Almost all of the Agile frameworks are lightweight. Lean is lightweight, Extreme is lightweight, Kanban is lightweight, DSDM is lightweight, Safe, lightweight, but a bit, with some extras. But generally Scrum is lightweight. It means that for us to understand Scrum, we just need to understand this 19-page document, for instance. You don't need a 500-page document to understand Scrum. That's the truth. It's lightweight. It is simple to understand, just 19 pages. But it is difficult to master. Why? Because what you are going to be asking from people who are participating in the Scrum process or in the Scrum framework is for them to be flexible, for them to adapt themselves, for them to change. And I gave this example in our last webinar. Somebody said that I can give this example. Everybody here is that we are all Nigerians, right? Somebody said the reason why it will be difficult for Nigeria to change is because the problem we have is not human resource problem, is not financial problem or whatever. The biggest problem we have is a mindset problem. Now, and changing people's mindset is difficult. Even changing your own mindset, individual mindset, is difficult. Talk less of changing other people's mindset. Now, in running a Scrum team like a Scrum Master, you yourself need to change, first of all, before you sell that change to the people who are participating in the process. So that's why we say Scrum is actually difficult to master and difficult to practice. And that's why I said earlier that Scrum is a journey. It's a journey that, you know, we'll continue to, the more we know, the better we get. Now, let's go back to our slides. I'll come back to the Scrum guide later. So these are examples of companies that use Scrum world over. So what do we know about Scrum today? Scrum is a framework within which people can address complex adaptive problems, just like we defined earlier. So essentially, Scrum is lightweight, simple to understand, and difficult to master. Now, the Scrum theory. Let's talk about the Scrum theory. What does it mean? The Scrum theory talks about essentially what we call the empirical process control. So Scrum is based on the empirical process control theory. And this is what we mean by, let me explain what that means. Empirical process control means that I act or I take actions based on what I know, not what I think. So I look at what is happening in my life as an individual, for instance, and I gather facts. I realize that, okay, these are the trends that I've observed in myself. I'm headed somewhere as an individual, but these are the trends that I've seen in myself that I think are not working, or these are the facts on the ground today. These are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, and all of that. And then my next line of action or next set of action is driven by what I know. So that is in a very simplistic form, that is the empirical process control concept, or what we call the empiricism. Now, the empirical process control is different from the theoretical process control. And how are they different? Let's review that on this slide. So the Scrum theory, we said, is based on the empirical process control, or empiricism, and we're trying to compare empirical versus theoretical. So Scrum, the empirical are what we have on top, theoretical is what we have on that. So Scrum prefers to learn as we go over command and control. So what does this mean? The empirical process control teaches us that everybody within the Scrum team, from Scrum Master to the development team members to the product owner, we are open to learning. There's no boss versus others mentality in a Scrum team. The Scrum Master is actually a servant leader. You know, if there was a way to change that title from Scrum Master so that people will not confuse it as, oh, I'm the boss and other people in the team are reporting to me. No, sir, that's not the structure. That's not the idea. The Scrum Master is first of all a servant at heart, serving the organization, serving the team members, serving the product owner, you know, providing service to everybody on the team. So everybody has the mindset of learning as we go. I'm coming back to empiricism now. We learn as we go over command and control. So there's no one person that calls the shot and says, this is the next thing we must do. This is the next feature we must build, and your opinions do not matter. No, that's not what the Scrum framework is built on. Everybody is open to learning as we go. So that's one of the things empiricism has over theoretical process control. Scrum prefers to plan for change over planning for what you expect to happen. That's powerful. So I said earlier that when we make plans or when we make project plans, for instance, within an Agile team or within a Scrum team, we must understand that our plan is just a guide and that we are open to change. And we cannot predict that change. And that is the adaptive nature of Agile. That's the iterative nature of Agile. So as we make our plans, we are open to planning for change, and change cannot be predicted, as opposed to planning for what we expect to happen. I don't know if you are following. Planning for what you expect to happen is okay. As a project manager, I can project into 6 months down the line. What do we expect to happen? Okay, maybe this, we need to get a server where we are going to deploy our application. Maybe we need to go cloud. Maybe we will need a database administrator down the line and all of that. You know, we put all of that into our project plan, your traditional approach. You can plan all of that out. But how do you plan for change? The change that you cannot predict. It means that you are open-minded. It means that you are flexible. It means that you are able to welcome change. Now, one of the ways to also plan for change, let's go back to that first one, learn as we go. It means empiricism teaches us that we are open-minded, we pick information, we pick the facts, and then we learn from it to make progress as a team, to deliver as a Scrum team. So that's also one of the ways of planning for change. Then the empiricism teaches us to embrace change over enforcing the plan. And I'm going to give you an example here. On my Scrum team, or in the Scrum team that I work with, one of the Scrum teams I work with, they are just being introduced to Scrum. They are being used to working in a very different way. And then we thought, okay, we need to work differently. Let's use Scrum. And one of the events that we need to have as a Scrum team is this daily stand-up, where everybody comes in to give an account, or like we check what everybody's working on a daily basis. We'll talk about that more as we move on. Just this week, I got some kind of feedback, like it looks as if people don't want to come for the daily stand-ups. And somebody was complaining over the collaboration channel just yesterday, actually. And why are people staying away from these stand-up meetings or daily meetings? You know, it should have been easy to just collate the names of the people who are staying away from the meeting and send it to the boss and say, these are the people not making our meeting successful. We are reporting them to you. That would be a traditional mindset. Let the boss deal with it. But no, we looked at I engaged with the person that raised the issue. I said, you know what I think we should do? Create a survey, use a tool where people's responses will be anonymous. Let's ask them what they think is wrong with or the challenges they have with our daily Scrum approach. Let's hear from them. Let's know what they think we should do differently. And let's see what we can adapt to from that, as opposed to, I could have gone into that room and said, if you don't come for stand-up, I'm going to collate your names. If you miss 2 or 3 stand-up, I'll collate your name, I'll send it to the boss, and they'll punish you. But you know what? That's not the Scrum approach. When you see some of those trends within your Scrum team, empiricism says, let's learn from what is happening. Let's dig deeper into this trend we are seeing. What exactly is the problem? Let's get people to speak up, and then let's see what we can adapt to, how much of a change we can make to get people doing the right thing. Like I said, this thing is about driving transformation, and the best way to drive transformation is if it comes from the inside out, not if we are enforcing it, right? Now, so embracing change. And then that survey was created yesterday, and we are still waiting for the feedback. I'm sure we're going to get some interesting feedback from that survey in the example I gave. So the empirical process is, don't enforce change. Don't enforce the plan. If the plan is not working, sir, be flexible enough, be open enough, be transparent enough to understand that, okay, let's get to the root cause of this thing. Why is this plan not working? Don't say, no, we said we must deliver to the client on XYZ day. If our reality as a team, or what we have come to find as a team, will not allow us to deliver to the client on XYZ day, then we need to start having a conversation. That is what empirical process control is about. Then it also teaches us to use, inspect, and adapt over using change control. What does this mean? Is sort of what I tried to explain earlier. You look at the trend, you look at what is happening in your team. Okay, we have said this is the plan that we have, this is what we are, this is the way we are going. By the time you check, you realize that some things are not working the way they're supposed to work, or I mean, you notice some trends. You do a search, you look closely, and then you inspect closely, like, okay, do a root cause analysis, or whatever, the 5 whys, or whatever approach you want to take. Again, like I said, Scrum does not tell you how to do what you need to do. It just tells you what to do, because there are so many ways to skin a lizard, or how do they say. So you inspect. You can use the 5 whys, you can use the root cause analysis, you can use any approach to do this kind of inspection. Survey, questioning, engaging people one-on-one, whatever. You inspect, and then you adapt to the truth that comes out of that inspection. So, I mean, this is just us trying to compare the empirical process control versus the theoretical process control. I'm going to go back to the Scrum guide again to drive home this point of empiricism. The Scrum theory, right? The Scrum theory is founded on empirical process control theory, or empiricism. Empiricism asserts that knowledge comes from experience and making decisions based on what is known. That's what I tried to explain earlier. The next decision we are making on this Scrum team, or with respect to this product, is based on what we know, not what we think we know. Okay, so that's the foundation of the Scrum framework. That's the empirical process control theory. Scrum employs an iterative, incremental approach to optimize predictability and control risk. Remember, we said that adaptive problems, adaptive products, things change quickly. Customer needs are so fluid. They change very quickly from one stage to the other. Now, how do we try to control that change? How do we try to minimize the impact of that change on what we are trying to deliver? Or how do we try to bring some kind of predictability into something that is not easily predictable? One of the ways is this empiricism, and is by using Scrum. So, we talked about Scrum using an iterative approach. What do you mean by iterative approach? I explained it earlier. I want to build a 500-page website, but I'm not going to focus on building the 500-page website at once. I'm going to break them into maybe 50 pages each. And if I'm going to break them into 50 pages, it means I'm going to do 10 iterations. So my first iteration is 50 pages. Within those 50 pages, I will do my requirement gathering, I will do my designs, I'll do my development, I'll do my testing, I'll do my deployment. I'll show it to the client. I will get feedback. I will take those feedback. Some of the things that I thought I've done out of the 50 pages, we'll have to go back. I will have to go back to redo. So iteratively, when I come to the next 50 pages, I repeat the same process. I plan, I mean, gather requirements, I design, I develop, I implement, I test, and then I deploy. I show to the client again, I get feedback. That's iterative approach. So we repeat that process for every iteration, right? It's like, on a very broad scale, it's like your plan, do, check, act. Plan, do, check, act. So that's what we mean by iterative. Now, incremental approach means that after I've done the first 50 pages, and I've showed it to the client, and let's say the client is happy, I deploy those first 50 pages, customer starts using it. I start getting some kind of feedback from customers as well, and more feedback from the clients that I can use to improve. When I do the next iteration, I will not deploy the next iterations on another server or on another another URL. I will add it to the initial 50 pages. So that's an incremental approach. So my goal is to develop 500 pages of websites, but I've developed the first 50 and then I've added another 50 to it. So that's what we mean by iterative incremental approach to optimize predictability and control risk. Optimizing predictability speaks to the fact that, look, things are not predictable. You need to keep adapting yourself. But a way to optimize predictability is to look at what you know, what has happened so far. We've done 100 pages of websites. What are the kind of feedbacks that I've been getting so far? What are the kind of concerns that have been raised so far? What are the trends? What are the questions that demands that customers are making, or the value that they are requesting for? What are those things? We need to, when we know all of those things, it can serve as a guide for us when we want to do the next 50 or the next 400 pages of the website. So we can optimize predictability in a very unpredictable atmosphere. So empiricism is very, very fundamental. Now, I believe you understand that. If you have questions, I'm happy to take your questions later. 3 pillars uphold every implementation of empirical process control. So don't forget, Scrum is founded on the empirical process control theory. So when we say 3 pillars uphold every implementation of empirical process control, we are saying 3 pillars uphold every implementation of Scrum. That's just what we mean. And what are those 3 pillars? Transparency, pillar 1. Inspection, pillar 2. Adaptation, pillar 3. I'm going to show you something. Give me a minute. Scrum Pillars. Show you a picture to have an understanding of what we mean. Okay, cool. This is good. Give me a minute. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
So Scrum is like a house built on three important pillars. Pillar number 1 is transparency. Pillar number 2, don't look at this text though. I'll explain transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Don't look at what is written here. I just wanted to show you this picture. Just focus on this picture. Pillar number 1 is transparency. Pillar number 2 is inspection. Pillar number 3 is adaptation. Those are the 3 pillars on which Scrum is built, right? Before we go so deep into that, before we talk about transparency, let me explain something here. So look at the color codes that represents requirements, design, code, and testing. I want to reinforce the knowledge of iterative and incremental delivery, right? So this project is a project that is supposed to be delivered within a 16-week window, right? If we follow the sequential or the waterfall model or the traditional model, we will do our requirement gathering. It will take 4 weeks to do requirement gathering. Now ask yourself, after I've gathered requirement for 4 weeks, have I delivered any value to the customer? No. Then I will do design for another 4 weeks. I've taken 8 weeks. Have I delivered any value to the customer? No. What represents value to the customer is a working software. Remember one of the principles of Scrum, of Agile. A working software is the primary measure of progress. And then we said that we value a working software over what? Can anybody remember?
Over comprehensive documentation.
Over comprehensive documentation. So this is part of documentation. We are documenting for 4 weeks. Customer has not gotten any value. We are designing for another 4 weeks. The guy has not gotten any value. At 12 weeks, we are coding. This guy has not gotten any value. Then at the end of 16 weeks, we are testing before we start to show some kind of value. This is what you typically get in a waterfall model. So we cannot deliver value quickly with the waterfall methodology. Now look at the look at the iterative approach. I take a small chunk of the work. I gather the requirement for that small chunk. I believe you can see my screen, my cursor moving. And then I do design for that small chunk. And then I code that small chunk. I test that small chunk and I release it to the customer. Go and look at what I've done. I gave one funny example the last webinar we have. I'm very hungry. I will typically eat I will typically eat 5 pieces of yam. And I come into the house, I'm very hungry. And there are 2 chefs in the house. They both know that I like to eat 5 pieces of yam with omelette or with egg or whatever. And then while one of them understands that because I'm so hungry, he quickly gives me 2 pieces of yam with one piece of egg. Then okay, start eating this one first. The other guy is still cutting 5 pieces of yam when I've already finished, eating something that satisfies my test first. That's a way to explain this thing. So within 4 weeks, I've given the customer some kind of value, short value, small value. But the guy is looking at it like, okay, he can give me quick feedbacks. I can take that feedback and adapt it. I can take learnings from what I did here. Empiricism teaches me to take learnings from what I observed while we were doing the work within these 4 weeks and adapt it to what I'm doing in the next 4 weeks. It means that continuously, iteration by iteration, I will get better in my delivery, right? So that's what it means. So I take another small chunk, I gather requirements, I design, I write the codes, I test, I deploy. The customer sees it again. So what I'm delivering here in terms of incremental delivery is what I've delivered here plus what I've added here. So there's an increment here. There's an increment here at the end of 4 weeks. There's an increment at the end of another 4 weeks. So in 8 weeks, I've delivered 2 sets of values, and I've improved on the initial value I delivered to the customer until I get to the end of the whole work. Instead of making the customer wait for 16 weeks when his competition would have gotten to the market here, you'll be shocked that the concept of MVP, although again, that's another buzzword that people misinterpret today, but the concept of MVP is something that you can relate to here. At the end of these 4 weeks, I can come out with something, maybe a beta version or something, throw it open to the customers, start getting their feedback. Okay, here I might not be able to do it here because what I've done so far might not represent, while it represents value to the customer, it might not represent value to the end user. Maybe by the time I get here, what I've built represents some kind of value to the end user. For instance, take Etisalat. When they came to Nigeria at the first time, they wanted people to register for their SIM cards. What did they do? I'm sure they were still setting up their offices, their infrastructure and everything. But they put up a website there. They said, come and register for your SIM card online. Select your own number. Input the number that you want to own. And a lot of people started creating numbers that match their existing MTN line or their Airtel line at the time, owning their own number on that website. That's one of the things that is allowed. They just give us that website. Even though that website was going to have so much more components, it was ready to end customers. Put up a page, people can log in, sign in, they can input the number they want to, they would prefer to have. It checks the database to say, okay, that number is not existing. Some kind of value. And then later they added more to the website, and then they got more value. But you know what? At the time they got us to start registering on that website, they already got a lot of customers stock and it's the next step that Etisalat was going to make. And that's the whole concept that we are trying to explain here. They must have taken learnings and feedbacks from what you are giving them, or maybe their website behaved when 500,000 people hit the website. They must have taken learnings from the concept of empiricism, theory of empiricism. They can improve the performance of that website. Yeah, I'm sure we can relate with what is here now, based on all the explanations I've done. This is your waterfall approach. This is your iterative and incremental approach. So you go in this cycle. I do da 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 da. I deliver something. Rather, I do this one in bits. This do everything in bits. Do everything in bits. Do everything in bits. By the time I'm getting in the middle of time, let's say this is a 16 weeks. By 8 weeks, I deliver some kind of value. So just the difference between waterfall and agile again, and then empiricism. Now, so I was going to talk about transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Now, let's dig deep a bit more into transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So, he says that significant aspects of the process, I don't say process now, talk about the Scrum process, must be visible to those responsible for the outcome. Now, what does this mean? I'm the one doing the work. I'm responsible for the outcome of building this product. And then my product owner has not made things clear enough to me. You know, for instance, you give me a feature to build. You don't tell me what makes up your acceptance criteria. You don't give me enough information. You have not created enough transparency around what you want me to build. Or I'm the developer, I'm writing the codes. You have told me what you want me to do, and I have questions that are not clear. And I don't come to ask you as a product owner, can you help me clarify this? Or I make new discoveries that might impact what I'm doing. I just go ahead, I just continue building it. After all, I'm the developer. Is anything I build that you take? That compromises transparency. So making aspects of the process visible to those responsible for the outcome is what we mean by transparency. Transparency requires those aspects be defined, that those aspects be defined by common standards so that observers share a common understanding of what is being seen. It's a very interesting example. The West African Examination Council exam, right, is written across West Africa. Okay, so imagine that the syllabus for the guys in Nigeria is different from the syllabus for the guys in Ghana, and they're supposed to write the same exam. There's no standard. There's no, standard syllabus. There's no standard teaching. So you're already setting up some people to fail. The same way, if you're working in a Scrum team and there are no certain standards like definition of done, at what point, what will I see that will make me know that, okay, we have actually completed this work? We need to agree to it. It cannot be changing in the middle of the game. It cannot be changing when we get to the end of the game. When I said, okay, I've finished building this phone, and then you tell me, no, you've not finished. But God, finished. I don't mean to build phone. I've built the phone. No, you've not finished. That will happen when there isn't a common standard, right? For example, a common language referring to the process must be shared by all participants. So let me take, I work in a team that build mobile apps for banks, right? So let me use that as an example. So we know that when we want to do transfers from one bank to the other today in Nigeria, there are a few options you will use. You're either using NIPS platform to route your transaction, or that's the NIP, or called the NIP, or you are using eTransact, or you are using, there's something InterSwitch also came up with recently. We are using those gateways, something like that. Now, if I'm working in a development team where we are building that kind of app, and I'm new to that team, and I don't know that transfers that we have as an organization, we have a preferred route where we push our interbank transfers through, for instance, and I just do whatever I like that I know or I think is right. And at the end of the game, I do it because we don't have a shared understanding, a common language. At the end of the day, when I think I'm done, I'm actually not done. I've wasted everybody's time. So transparency means that we'll have a shared understanding, a shared knowledge around things that we ought to know as a team. And one of the jobs of a Scrum Master is to ensure transparency. Because if there's no transparency, we will fail in whatever it is we are trying to build. Another example is those performing the work and those inspecting the resulting increments must share a common definition of done, right? That's what I said earlier. The person to inspect my work, the end user that I'm going to demo to, should not have a different understanding or a different expectation from what I have, being the person building the work. Do you understand? So that transparency is key, and it is tied around a shared understanding, a common understanding of done, and a common language and common expectation. See, I've been frustrated a lot in trying to implement Scrum across some of my teams. So when should I be saying this? Okay, no. But I mean, let me just give a general example. Let's see a team. So there's a friend of mine who is Dutch, who is also a Scrum Master, and we're talking one day, and was telling me, oh, he's very experienced with Scrum, and was telling me he once worked on a product where the testing team was in one city, in a different city or in different states in Holland. The development team sat in a different state. The UI UX team sat somewhere else. And to make it worse, all of those teams belong to different companies. The different components of the work were outsourced to different companies. And the guy said to me, I was frustrated on that project. I had to leave. Because I tried to change things to say, okay, even now that everybody belongs to different organizations, have different level of interest, and different reporting lines, we are building one product. We're supposed to collaborate strongly. Let's have a shared understanding of done, or let's try to improve transparency. People were not open to that because they were trying to protect their own organization. And you know what these organizations do, for instance? I'll tell you, oh, I have the best hands in development, and then I'll put one very experienced developer and some quack developers in quotes, and then the work keeps dragging out. We are not clear on what they're trying to do. There's no speed, no direction, no clarity. And what that typically get, people are protecting their own space. In a Scrum team, and for Scrum to work, there's no my space. There's nothing to protect. If your work is going to impact on my work, we must have transparency, right? I just wanted to explain that clearly. Inspection. The Scrum users must frequently inspect Scrum artifacts and progress towards a sprint goal to detect undesirable variances. Now I'll explain, somewhere down the line, we'll talk about Scrum artifacts and sprint goal, but let me just put this one in perspective for us. So essentially, when you're running a project, there's a desired goal, and then there are milestones, like, okay, at the end of week 1, this is what we should have achieved. At the end of week 10, this is where we should be. This is the direction we should be headed. Now, inspection is our opportunity to detect variations from the targets that we have set for ourselves or from the expectations on that project. So it says Scrum users must frequently inspect Scrum artifacts and progress towards a sprint goal to detect undesirable variances. Their inspection should not be so frequent that inspection gets in the way of the work, right? Inspections are most beneficial when diligently performed by skilled inspectors at the point of work. For instance, code review. If you have a very experienced developer that can, look at so let's say we have the developers are working on a collaborative platform. They're writing their code on a collaborative platform, and then they're checking their codes somewhere. So I use software examples a lot because I work in software, but we can also find other examples. If you have questions, if you are unclear, you can bring up your area of work, and then we can have conversations around that. So I use software a lot in my explanations. Now, by the time they check in their code on our collaborative platform, an experienced code reviewer does not need to sit down with the developer when they are doing their work to say, let me see what you're writing. Are you sure you're writing the right thing? Are you sure you're doing the correct thing? Do you understand? Are you using the right framework and all of those things? No, it doesn't have to happen. If you do that, you'll be getting in the way of the work. Don't forget that we are working within a time frame. But when those codes are checked in, a code reviewer can go to where those codes have been checked in and review what he needs to review, make comments and all of that, or push it back to developer to say correct X, Y, Z. So inspection, it must be frequent, but it should not be so frequent to get in the way of delivering on the work. Don't forget, inspection is just a way of checking what we are doing to ensure that we are realigned to the objectives of the project. 3 pillars: transparency, inspection, and then adaptation. Let's talk about adaptation. If an inspector determines that one or more aspects of a process deviates outside acceptable limits, and that the resulting product will be unacceptable to the product, to the customer, to the end user, the process or the material being processed must be adjusted. And that's the concept of adaptation. After we have inspected what work is being done, you have realized that something deviates from the standards that we expect. Adjustment is a must. You must adjust the work, as soon as possible. And it says that an adjustment must be made as soon as possible to minimize further deviation. So three pillars: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Now, without transparency, there can be no inspection. What do I mean? I'm taking it a bit advanced now. Without transparency, there can be no inspection. If the people doing the work are not open about the work they are doing, if we don't know what they are developing, if we cannot see the code that the developer is writing, if we don't even know which task or which feature is working on, if there's no, that transparency does not exist, there's nothing to inspect. And if we do not inspect, there's nothing to adapt. So those 3 pillars are tied together. Without transparency, there's no inspection. Without inspection, there's no adaptation. So those 3 pillars work hand in hand. Transparency first across everything that we do. Inspection, joint inspection by the team, inspection by a skilled inspector, inspection by everybody in the Scrum team, and then adaptation based on what we have inspected. Now, Scrum prescribes 4 formal events for inspection and adaptation, as described in the Scrum event section of this document. So when we get there, we'll go into more details, but let me just give a very high level explanation. So there are some, remember I said earlier that Scrum is divided into, okay, maybe I've not said it. We have Scrum events, we have Scrum, the people within the Scrum team, that's the Scrum rules. We have rules that tie the events, the rules, and the artifacts. So there's Scrum events, there are Scrum artifacts, there are Scrum rules like the different roles that people play in a Scrum team. And then there are rules that tie all of those things together. So these events, the Scrum events, are these 4 that we have listed here: the sprint planning, the daily Scrum, the sprint review, the sprint retrospective. What are we trying to say here? These events in Scrum are formal events for inspection and adaptation. So every time you do a sprint planning, every time you do a sprint planning event, a daily Scrum event, a sprint review event, and a sprint retrospective event, which you are going to learn more about as we go on. It is an opportunity for you to inspect and adapt. What does that mean? Breaking it down more clearly, it means that if you do these events properly, the way they should be done, by the time you are getting to your demo or to the end of the sprint, you would have, as much as possible, cut a lot of possible deviations, and corrected them before you get to the end of the sprint. Okay, so that the surprises are minimized.